Hi, morning everyone. My name's Nick Osborne. I'm a senior technical consultant at Koris and 365 IT. So we're going to get started shortly because I can see a few more people joining, but we're just gone past 11:30, so appreciate everyone's time's important. So Koris and 365 IT, we're a Microsoft multiple gold partner, and we've got years and years of experience within the UC space, so we're well placed to talk today about this smart approach to adding voice to Microsoft Teams. So just a bit of housekeeping before we start on the presentation. If you could make sure you're on mute, please, during the presentation, that would be great. And if you've got any questions, either pop them in the chat on the Teams session, or alternatively, we'll have an opportunity at the end of the session to open it up for questions from everyone. So with that done, I'm going to get started. So today's agenda is we're going to start off by giving you a quick intro to Microsoft Teams, and then I'm then going to talk about what you need for voice within Microsoft Teams. We're going to talk about the Microsoft calling plan options, some of the benefits and limitations of that, and then we're also going to talk about the direct SIP solutions that we provide. I'm then going to talk to you about some real-world deployment examples, so you can see that people are actually doing this and have been doing this stuff. And then at the end, as I said, we'll have some time for some questions. So introduction to Microsoft Teams. So what does it do? I like to sort of kind of split it into two parts, really. In one respect, it's a collaboration tool. So that's allowing your users to do things like share documents, create workspaces together, work on projects together, and kind of collaborate and work how they want to in a way that works well for them. So that's kind of one chunk of it, the kind of collaboration tool, and there's a lot behind the scenes around Teams. Around it uses SharePoint for some of the document storage, and it uses OneDrive, and it has a whole kind of large app store in effect as well to add on different tools for collaboration, and that might be integrating stuff like Slack or WebEx or loads of different tools. So it is in one respect a very significant collaboration tool. The other side of it, I'd say, is a communication tool. So like what we're using it for right now, for web conferencing, but also for telephony. So it lets me make and receive calls. I can be a member of a hunt group, like from a traditional phone system. I can have things like group pickup. I can even have a handset if I want to have one. And as well as that, it'll do IM and presence, so I can send people messages. I can see their availability and stuff. So that's the other side of it for me. I think is the communications tool. They're the two bits that make up Teams, really. And then it's a native app within the Microsoft Office suite. So one of the big advantages I'd say of that is that it's already part of the Office suite. It's probably already deployed onto a desktop if people are using Office 365. So there's no challenges around integrating nicely or playing nicely with the rest of the Office suite versus third-party collab and communication tools that are by a different manufacturer, and they have to spend more time trying to make them work nicely with the Office suite. So being a native app, I think, is quite a sort of a nice part of Teams. So yeah, that's what it does very, very briefly. The other thing, I guess, important to mention at the moment is the usage of Teams and how it's increased massively. So that sort of snip on the right shows how the usage of it has increased hugely within the last sort of 3 or 4 months for completely obvious reasons for home workers. But what's kind of interesting about this usage and adoption is that a lot of it is being driven from users towards IT instead of IT towards users. So whereas an organization may have had some collaboration tools and some soft phone tools and stuff like that, users are finding quite often that they have Teams available to them, and now they're starting to use that for their collaboration solution, and they're finding it works really well for them. So there's a big push now coming from users towards IT to want to deploy and start using Teams for telephony, which is I completely understand from an IT point of view. That's a pain because it's users driving driving the kind of the adoption of it. But we're starting to see it now in organisations where it's really changing the conversation of how quickly they would normally deploy an application, and they are realising that this is making users' life easier, and so they're accelerating sort of teams deployment plans because of that. So yeah, that user demand has had quite a big impact, and I think it's been one of those things that's quite hard to argue against now, completely because, well, not completely, but mainly because of the coronavirus pandemic, that users are saying this makes my life easier. Why can't I have it, kind of thing. So that's the thing, sort of, that one of the reasons I think why we've seen this massive increase. I mean, there's April is 75 million active daily users. So that's people actually using Teams, not just they've got the app installed. So yeah, so Teams, what does it do? And kind of we've seen this huge increase in usage on it. That's cool. We can have Teams, like, but how do we get voice on it? What do I need to be able to make and receive calls from my Teams application? How can I make it my soft phone? So what do you need to voice? So we need some licensing. Obviously, it's a Microsoft product, so we're going to need some licensing for it. But we can start with a base plan of either Microsoft 365 Business, Office 365 E1, E3, E5, or Microsoft E1 or E5. So those sort of plans give us a baseline for it, and then the equivalent not-for-profit or education or government versions of those. So that kind of gives us the Teams app. And then on top of that, we need something called a phone system license, which is what it says. It allows Teams to be a telephone. So we need that. And then if we want to do dial-in conferencing, or if we want to have a dial-in conferencing number on meeting invites, then we need to have an audio conferencing license as well. And then if we want to be able to make and receive those telephone calls from the Teams client, so actually want to be able to type in a telephone number and call someone, or somebody calls me on their DDI, on my DDI, sorry, I need a calling plan or direct SIP as well. So they're the bits that we need to make voice happen. We're going to go into a bit more detail on the calling plan part of it later on in the presentation, because they're the kind of the key bits that give you the ability to make or receive a telephone call, I suppose. Another thing on here, really important, is, and it's kind of an obvious statement, but you need headsets. But you need to make sure that the headsets are qualified or approved headsets for Microsoft Teams. In lots of deployments, and not just Teams or Skype or Mitel, we see a common problem where a user starts to work from home, or they start to use a soft phone application. They decide they don't like their wired USB headset, which nothing wrong with those. That's what I've got here. They decide they don't like that, and instead they want to use their Beats by Dre headset, or maybe their USB, Bluetooth speakerphone that they use for playing music through, or their iPhone headset because it's comfortable or whatever, it works well. Because those devices aren't designed to be VoIP headsets, they cause no end of call quality problems with a user's experience. Quite often the user doesn't realize they're causing a problem on the call. So if they're, as I said, if they're wearing their Beats headset or something, that might be awesome for music, but the microphone might not be selected properly on it. It might be using the laptop microphone or the screen microphone or something like that. So headsets are massively important, and making sure they're deployed in the right way. Otherwise, you could do everything you possibly can to ensure the user experience is great, and then at the very last bit where it gets in their head or comes out their mouth, that's where you've got the problem. So yes, definitely, if you're planning to sort of look into this, make sure headsets are part of the plan as well. And then just the other point on there, I suppose, you need to have your Exchange environment in hybrid, or you need to be using Exchange online to be able to use the voicemail functionality as part of Teams. So that's what we need for Teams. We need some licensing, we need a headset, and then yeah, you need to have your Exchange hybrid or online. So moving on to the bit I mentioned towards the end of that, so the calling plan or direct SIP. So this is how we get the telephone calls in and out of Microsoft Teams. So I either need to have a calling plan from Microsoft, which I'll describe in a minute, or I need to have a direct SIP service from someone like Koris 365 IT. Either one of those gets me the telephone calls in and out of Teams. So let's move on to talking about the Microsoft calling plans first. So these are services that you can buy from Microsoft as part of your Office 365 subscription. And they've got a few different options. So and those options are based on the numbers that are kind of bundled or included with your service. So they've got a very basic plan there, 120 minutes, which personally I think 2 hours of being on the phone is pretty limited for most users. So that may not be that useful. Then another domestic plan, 1200 minutes. So that's domestic as in, or the way Microsoft refer to domestic is, say for us, it'll be UK, local, national and mobile calls. Or if you need international calls, then they've got an option there for domestic and international calling. That's about £18 a month. So they're the kind of options. I skipped over the business voice option. That just includes the audio conferencing license to let you have dial-in conferencing. But they're the options that Microsoft offer for your calling plan. So as you're adding up the price for your deployment of Teams telephony, these are the sort of things we need to make sure we include. So we'll come on to the direct SIP option in a second, but this is if you are choosing the Microsoft calling plans, this is what you've got to make sure you kind of include on there. Other part to mention on here briefly is something called communications credits. So Microsoft give you this concept of bundling in some numbers of calls, but what if you need to call a premium rate number, or you've got a user with a domestic plan that needs to make international? So the way Microsoft have catered for that is you have prepay credits that you have to pay in advance through Office 365 portal. So you may set it up to initially pay £1,000 of funds into the pot, and then that would recharge when that pot gets used up. So a little bit different to how we would normally expect to handle telephony billing, which is probably in arrears and we get itemized bills. This other way is a little bit, I'd say maybe a little bit backward. It's a bit like having the old school kind of Skype credits to be able to make calls. But it is required if you need to make anything outside of the calling plans you have on there. So yeah, that's the Microsoft calling plans, which is one way for us to get the calls in and out of Teams. Just on here, a couple of sort of benefits and limitations of this. So those calling plans, they are quick to deploy because it's a couple of clicks on the 365 portal, and I can apply that license. Some of the limitations of it, I'd say, are potentially around the porting of numbers in and out of Microsoft. So that's the process of moving your telephone numbers from one provider to another. That process is still relatively new, I'd say, for Microsoft. It's also a relatively hands-off automated process, so you don't have much interaction in the porting process with them. So that's not a great part, I'd say, of it at the moment. Also, you can't port non-geo numbers to them at the moment. So that's 03 numbers or 0844 numbers, I think. So so porting's not great. The cost is quite high as well. The solution that we can provide with direct SIP is cheaper than the Microsoft calling plans. And when you look at those calling plans and you start to add up £9 or £18 per user per month on top of all the other stuff, that starts to get quite significant. Prepay. I mentioned on the previous slide kind of how you have to do that for out of plan minutes. And then I think we'll come on to this stuff in a bit, but there's no real way to kind of integrate with your existing SIP PBX when you're purely on the calling plans, and part because of that as well, the migration process is a big bang migration. So you're moving from your old system to your new system in one big sort of chunky go. So yeah, there's some sort of benefits and limitations I'd like to say of the calling plans. So that's the Microsoft calling plans. What's the other solution? It's the Koris 365 IT direct SIP for Microsoft Teams. So quite a big mouthful there, but it is our service to provide you with telephony for Microsoft Teams. So it's definitely a cost-effective alternative to the Microsoft calling plans. We've been doing SIP for years and years. So porting for us is a very standard process that we've got dedicated staff that understand it and deal with it regularly. And there's actually people involved in that porting process. So we've got a lot of experience with it. And so I think that's one of our advantages, I'd say, is helping to manage that porting process and being as flexible as we can with your requirements and what the carriers support and stuff like that. So because of that porting process makes it possible for us to perform phase migrations as well. Depending on the carriers and stuff, we can even move individual numbers between trunks, which is great, and that kind of keeps disruption to a minimum, which is obviously kind of very very important. We also do per user per month billing, so where the idea of the communications credit sort of pot thing, we bill in the normal fashion where you would receive your monthly itemized bill for the calls outside of any sort of plan that you were using from us. And I think this one's really important for anybody that's logged a ticket with Microsoft. They know how much fun you have with that. We support our SIP services directly. It runs on our infrastructure in our data centers, and it's something that we've been doing for, as I said, for years with Skype for Business and Mitel and lots of other systems. We understand that and we run that, so we support it directly. So if we have any issues, we've got the visibility, the access to it to be able to support that, and yeah, provide you with a sort of a rapid sort of response kind of thing. And I suppose, yeah, I guess as well, I've sort of mentioned it in the other points, but our experience goes to show that, or goes to sort of cover the fact that we can do the porting, we support our own SIP service, and it's something we've been doing for a long time. So for our direct SIP service, there's two kind of options really. We can divide it out into. I don't want to kind of give you too many kind of solutions here, but really with direct SIP, there's either your solution is a simple setup where you just need some SIP service into your Teams. You want to be able to make and receive calls from your Teams client. So that's what we call our kind of option one simple solution. We can plug some SIP into you, in effect. It's competitively priced, and it's really quick for us to deploy. So that'll cater for some customers. But the other solution we've got is where you have a more complex environment. So that might be where you want to coexist with an existing phone system for a bit. You might have some legacy systems on site. So maybe that's an analog gateway, or maybe that's some analog devices like intercoms, or maybe like a legacy contact center that uses ISDN for its connectivity. So with our solution, we can plug all that stuff into your SIP service and allow you to make and receive calls between your Teams clients and your legacy contact center or whatever the old on-prem stuff is. And that's something that we do regularly. It's not a new thing for Teams for us. So yeah, so we can sort of support those more complex environments and give you a kind of a safer migration plan, I suppose, or a lower risk as we move users and stuff over from one system to another. We can also, kind of looking at the other side of that, from the legacy to what's going on in the future, we can host new Teams contact centers within our environment alongside the services we're providing to you. So we're an Edgehouse Gold partner, so that might be EICC or QMS. That might be running alongside the PSTN service within our DCs, so you can get to a point where you don't need any on-prem infrastructure whatsoever apart from the users and some internet connectivity, because we run all of it outside of our run all of it from inside our data centers on our sort of HA infrastructure. So yeah, that's the kind of this more complex environment. Kind of we've got the capability and the infrastructure there to cater for that stuff. So it's obviously a more detailed conversation, and it's more of a kind of like we'd go into some design phases and stuff like that. But we're pretty confident we've got the infrastructure there to do what's needed based on our experience with lots of other projects like this. And I suppose one last point on there. So you've got your contact center. Let's say you've got your old contact center on-prem. You've got some Teams users, and you've got another phone system somewhere else. Once we've got it all connected into our service, you end up in effect having a single SIP trunk that then caters for all your services. So you're not having to retain like an ISDN line for the contact center with some numbers on and some other bits all over the shop. It all kind of goes in through a central, highly available SIP service. So yeah, there's sort of two options really for our direct SIP service, how we can cater for sort of the straightforward sort of simple requirement. We can deploy it quickly, or if we need to talk in a bit more detail and do something a bit more interesting, yeah, all good for that. So I talked lots about kind of what we can do and stuff. So I think it's important to also talk about what has been done, what people are doing, so you know that this is not just people aren't just reacting to the coronavirus pandemic. There's actually people that have been using Teams for a while, and it's yeah, they're using it for their telephony. So we've got a couple of examples here. So the first one is a broadcast company. They're part of Sky. We've worked with them for a while. Originally, they used Skype for Business through us, which they ran as an on-premises environment with their own SIP trunks into that environment. So we've migrated them over to Teams for telephony. We started off by piloting just a couple of DDIs from their range, so we're able to port just one or two numbers from their current service to our Teams service, so they could trial out for a week or two how they felt with using the Teams client. And then when we were ready, we just moved all the other numbers over in a space of sort of 10-15 minutes. So that was quite a nice sort of clean process for that. So they went from being on premises to 100% cloud for their telephony solution, which is hosted in our DCs, and there are about 50 users for those guys, I think. So another example is a global education company that we've been working with for a while to move them off of multiple PBXs onto multiple Office 365 tenants. So they were actually sort of splitting as a group. So whilst normally you'd think, maybe, aren't we going to consolidate all these PBXs into one tenant? For them, actually, they needed to have separate tenants. So we moved different kind of chunks from different PBXs into different 365 tenants. So they moved completely to Teams for their telephony, and still had a centralized SIP infrastructure. So we have all their services coming in to our HA data centers, and then we partition them off to the different sort of organizations from there. And then obviously we can build them separately for the different organizations. Now they're separated, and I think that was around about 1,000 users for those guys. So another one, an investment organization. So they're an investment trust. They were moving out of a building they shared with another part of the organization into a dedicated office. So for them, we deployed Teams for them. They're already quite a heavy Microsoft house. So it made sense for them to start using Teams for telephony. When we deployed that solution, it was pretty early on for Teams, so there weren't really any established native Teams call recording products at the time. So because we have this DC infrastructure and our SIP infrastructure, we were able to put in a call recorder alongside the service we provide to give them call recording, even though there wasn't actually a Teams call recording product. So whilst it was a relatively sort of small deployment, it still kind of counted as one of our complex ones, but we could cater for it because of the infrastructure we've got in there. And then the last one is a union. So they've been a long-term Mitel customer for us, and a reasonably long-term Skype customer for us as well. They moved a while ago from Skype for Business Online to Skype for Business hosted by us. And so they've been using those two systems for a while, Mitel for the telephony and Skype for Business for the collaboration side of stuff. So we brought Teams into the mix, and we set it up so all three systems could coexist. So at the moment, they've got a lot of voice users on Mitel, some on Skype, and some piloting on Teams. And because we've kind of got, again, I keep saying this sort of central infrastructure, we can easily move the DDIs between the systems. So when they want to pilot certain users, it's easy for us to push the numbers across between them. But that one, I sort of expect eventually the Skype for Business part of it will probably be replaced by the Teams part of it. So it's as I said, it's easy for us to manage that migration and handle how those numbers move between the systems. And I think they've got just under about 400 users across all three systems there. So yeah, there's some examples. I think out of that list, probably one of them has migrated to Teams since March, but I'd say that probably wasn't a direct reason because of coronavirus. It was because they wanted to get rid of some on-prem infrastructure. All the other ones have been in conversations prior to what's going on. So I guess I'm trying to sort of say that people have been planning to move to Teams for a while. The kind of increase in that is obvious, but it's not people using Teams is not reactive. I'd say it's becoming a bit more of a sort of a strategy of I want to be more flexible and working and stuff like that. Yeah, so that was as I said, I wanted to touch on some deployment examples there to let you know kind of what we're actually doing. There's lots of others in the pipelines, but there were a few that I thought kind of that were useful to mention. So I guess sort of to try and sort of summarize what I've been talking to you guys about today really is that we've seen this huge increase in Teams usage, with it currently being the number 2 conferencing tool. So number 1 is Zoom, which is in the press a bit for maybe not the right reasons. But yeah, so Zoom might be number 1. It is, you know, it's kind of, it has nice things like loads of people on the screen at once and stuff, but you can't really control it very well within your infrastructure. So that's why I think Teams has got a good fit, because you can manage it properly. You can enable and disable stuff. You've got a lot more control over it, and it's a native Microsoft app. So yeah, huge increase in it, but which is good. So it's already part of Office 365. Just mentioned that. So yeah, it's a native app. But when you're sort of planning this, don't forget about the Office 365 licensing requirements, because it's very easy for users to push to say, I want to start using Teams for voice, but they don't necessarily understand that there is going to be probably a little bit of a cost increase in there. But that cost may be offset by getting rid of whatever the existing telephony solution was and all its maintenance and all that sort of stuff. Actually, it might be reasonable, and taking into account them not having to have a WebEx or a Zoom subscription or something like that, all those sort of things start to kind of sort of fitting quite nicely. So yeah, so licensing requirements are important. I talked a bit about the Microsoft calling plans versus direct SIP. So they were, as I said, they were the 2 ways to get telephony into your Teams environment, and yeah, those 2 options, and we're providing the direct SIP service. We can also help you if you want to go down the Teams calling plan route, if that's the way you want to go. But yeah, so we can handle that. Yeah, I think I mentioned at the beginning, we're a Microsoft sort of multiple gold partner, also an in-house gold partner. So we've got the kind of the skills and experience for this stuff. So how can you sort of move forward with this? There's 3 options. We can help you with the Microsoft calling plans if you want to choose that solution. We can also rapidly deploy direct SIP for you. So that's our sort of simple kind of SIP solution where you just plug you into our SIP service into Teams. Or if you've got more complex requirements, we can handle that as well. And it may be that you start off with a simple kind of deployment where we just plug some SIP into your Teams tenant, but we go with a vision of in the future, in maybe 3 or 4 months' time, we're going to start doing some more stuff where we connect it into maybe an on-prem PBX or something like that. So we can plan for the future as well with the direct SIP solutions that we're providing. So yeah, that was that's everything I wanted to cover off today. Hopefully it was useful. We've got lots of time left for questions, so I'm gonna just put myself on mute for a sec. I'm just gonna open up the chat and see what we've got on questions, and then we can go from there, I think. So just give me 2 seconds. Okay, cool. So what have we got? So I've got somebody asking, are the MS rates competitive? So I'd say no, they're not, because when you look at sort of having to pay, say, £9 a user a month for 250 users, just for being able to make and receive calls, that becomes quite a significant cost. So yeah, I'd say that I don't think they're competitive really. What else have we got? So we've already migrated to a Koris Mitel hosted system. How do we get this integrated into Teams? Okay, so you guys are recognize the domain. So you guys are on our SIP services at the moment. So what we would probably do is, well, we can connect you to Teams from the same SIP services. So we can set it up so we can route calls between your Mitel system and Teams. So that's something we can do. Yeah, just give us a shout. We can absolutely get you kind of using Teams for pilot and talk about a migration plan going forward. So yeah, that's doable, and it's all sort of soft changes for that stuff as well. Can you share number rates? So Mark Walker, can you share number ranges between Teams and PBX users? Yes, as long as you've got a central SIP service to deliver that. So that's where I keep sort of talking about the kind of Koris 365 IT infrastructure we have. We've got a central SIP service that kind of comes down here, and then we send some calls off to one system and some off to the other. So yes, you can share numbers between Teams and PBX users, but they need to be using the same central SIP service. So we've got, what are the contract lengths for direct SIP? That's probably a account manager question, I think, if that's all right. So give your account manager a shout. If you haven't got an account manager, drop me an email and I can get somebody to contact you. What are the approved headset makes? So Darren asked, what are the approved headset makes? So hopefully there'll be the slides being sent out, but there's a link in the slide where I talk about licensing, which takes you to the Microsoft site for the approved headsets. And there's Jabra, Poly, there used to be Plantronics. There's a whole bunch of approved headsets available. Do you have a cost comparison between your direct SIP plus minutes plus Ver? Yes. So Richard Hoare, I think if you give your account manager a shout, they can sort that out. If not, as I said, drop me an email and I can put you in touch with someone. You mentioned call recordings was something you had to add. Is it not native in Teams? So Richard Shreve, hopefully, sorry if I've pronounced your surname incorrectly. So Richard, you call recordings, correct? It's not a native. So normal, what you call we can record meetings like we're doing now, but normal call recording is not native in Teams. There is an API that's being made available in July-ish this year, which is opening up a whole load of interfaces into the Teams environment to allow things like proper call recording, proper sort of third-party integration to it. So it's all waiting on that, to be honest. There's a number of manufacturers, Enghouse included, that can do call recording for Teams, but this true native integration is waiting on this release from Microsoft. In the meantime, you can record trunk side, and that's how we cater for call recording at the moment. So Jude, can you only use headsets with Teams? Are there any approved handsets? Okay, yes, Jude, absolutely. So the two manufacturers I'd say we use is Poly. Poly would be my preference because they've been doing it for ages and they do really solid, decent devices. So Poly have the CCX range, which is their Teams approved headsets, Yealink as well is the other manufacturer that are a bit newer to the market. So yeah, so they're proper handsets with buttons on and things, receivers and stuff. Then the handsets are quite nice. They have kind of like color screens on and that sort of thing as well. So yes, absolutely, handsets are a thing that is available still. So if you have a range of DDIs, how do you know if you can move just a few? Okay, so question about if I've got a range of DDIs, how do I know if I can move just a few or you have to move them all? So if we have DDIs on with a provider. So one of the providers we use is a company called Gamma, and they're huge in the UK. So if somebody's using a SIP service, they're probably using Gamma. So with Gamma, we can easily move numbers between Gamma trunks. So in particular, if they're on our service, we can move an individual number between one Gamma trunk to another trunk. So that's how we can move just individual numbers. But if we're moving from one provider to another, we do need to move the whole DDI range across in one go. That said, what we would probably, how we would plan that to allow us to go back to the move individual numbers is we'd probably, so say you've got an on-prem PBX that's got an ISDN line in it, and we would put a gateway on site online on that ISDN line that gets us SIP access to the PBX. We'd connect that into our data center. So now we've got we've got a way into your ISDN line and your phone system. We'd then move your numbers off of your ISDN line onto our SIP service, but still deliver them down to your PBX. So as far as your PBX is concerned, nothing's changed, but now we've got control of the numbers on our side. So now we can do this stuff around moving individual numbers, adding on services and that kind of thing. So that's how we get around that point where if we want to be able to get numbers and then have more control, we port them across, but still deliver them into the PBX. And that's pretty low risk as well, because we've got that bit of kit in line that lets us sort of manipulate the calls and stuff. So I just speak with the cover. So I think that answers the other question about DDIs. That if you're going between providers, you typically have to move the whole range, but that gateway thing kind of gets around. You do move all the DDIs, but then you still send a lot of them back to the old system. What are the reporting capabilities? So Andrew Williams asked, what are the reporting capabilities of Team Voice? Okay, so within Teams, there's a reasonable amount of nice native reporting. So if I won't bring it up now, but as in on my screen now. But if I went to view a user account within the Teams portal in the Microsoft portal, I could view the call history for that user. I could then drill down onto the individual calls for that user and see call quality, packet loss, latency, all that sort of stuff, and a little bit of an indication on where Teams thought that if there was an impact in call quality, it was there. So there's native stuff in there that's kind of reactive though. So I can go in and I can see what happened for a user. There's a product that we use when we want sort of proper reporting that we layer on top. It's called Clobber, and that provides much more detailed analytics around the team side of it. So it will act as a traditional call logger, so we can use it for creating itemized billing if we need to sort of report on a number of calls to certain users and stuff like that. It'll also report on, aside from the telephony bit, the usage of Teams, so we can see how many Teams people are setting up in Teams. We can see if people are creating a meeting with one person in it. So a sort of a little bit of a habit that's been popping up is people working from home setting up a meeting with just themselves in it, so people think it looks like they're in a meeting. So we can report on how many one-person meetings people are having. Yeah, Andrew, there is some native reporting in there, but it's kind of reactive. So we find we layer on this other product on top to give us that that layer of sort of extra functionality. Steve Nichols, can the handsets be used by remote workers if they plug into their own broadband connection? Yeah, absolutely. So the handsets will be authenticated to Office 365 as a standalone endpoint. So I can take that handset, and anywhere I've got some internet, I can plug it in, and as long as the internet's like okay, it will work, and I can treat that as my handset. So yes, absolutely, you can give users handsets to take home. Only they don't need to. So that handset, as I said, will work on the internet anywhere. The home connection doesn't need to be a site-to-site IPsec tunnel. The handset will just connect over the internet. Where can we find out details about Teams Contact Center? Steve, drop me an email and we can have a chat about the Enghouse Contact Center solutions that are available now and what's coming quite soon as well. So Martin, can we use IVR within Teams telephony setup? Yep, totally. We can do that. So within within Teams in the back end, it's still got the normal sort of telephony features you'd expect, so stuff like hunt groups. But yes, absolutely, we can set up IVRs, so we can have a menu system where press 1 for this department, press 2 for that department, and then route that off to groups of people or individuals and stuff like that. So what calling plans do you offer? We, I guess it's probably a commercial sort of answer, but we offer we do offer the calling plans similar to what Microsoft do, but definitely more cost effective than the Microsoft calling plans. So yeah, just drop me an email and I can hook you up with someone for that. Music on hold as well. Good question. So we can have music on hold for queuing, music on hold for the client side. Steve, I'll have to check that one for you and get back to you if that's all right. Chris Horner, is there a time with mobile calling? Can you answer your DDI numbers via Teams app on a mobile phone? Yeah, totally. So the Teams app on mobile is so much better than the Skype mobile app. It's really good. It's reliable. You get messages when people send you messages, and you can also view content on there as well. So yes, the Teams app, treat it as a soft phone on your mobile device, and it's really good, I think. Yeah. So haven't got any more questions. If anybody didn't want to type and instead wants to ask a question on the audio, then just please sort of unmute yourself. If it's all quiet, then I think that's, yeah, so no more questions. Okay. So yeah, so I hope today was useful. The questions that came through were really good. I'm really pleased everyone asked all those questions because they're all kind of relevant things to what people are interested in here. If you want any more information, drop me an email, or if you're already a Koris customer or 365 IT customer, speak to your account manager. But yeah, so thanks very much for everyone attending. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope it's sunny. I hope you're all staying safe, and speak to you soon.